Welcome back everyone to the channel. Merry Christmas to all of you. I haven't been updating recently, but I'll be pumping 2 videos back to back, and it's going to be talking about the balance of power. This is a video that was recently posted by GS or New World on their YouTube channel, so we're going to talk a little bit about the changes. First up, we're going to talk about PvP modes. Okay, so they've spoken about how pre-mades are just completely dominating the win-loss ratio for OPRs, as well as arenas, of course. They didn't actually bring up arenas, but it is the case. 2-man queues are just dominating in arenas. But we're talking about OPR specifically now. Like, who would have thought pre-mades have a higher win rate? Of course, that's going to be the case. That's going to be the case in every single game. You're just going to have a better team composition. You're going to be working together more effectively if you're playing for a group of friends. Now, how do they balance that? Well, a lot of it just comes down to the system. The system itself kind of sucks, let's be real. They don't really have a balance when it comes to queues of the classes. You might have one team with literally 15 ranged DPS players, maybe 2 healers, 2 melees, and 1 of whatever. And then the other team just has a proper composition thanks to pre-mades, or maybe not even because of pre-mades, and they're going to have a way higher chance of winning. And that's why they also stated that melees, even though rangers have a higher pick rate, melees are actually winning most of the games. The main problem is because rangers or light ranged players cannot hold space, they cannot hold their ground when you have bruisers, melee decks just running at you, so they're not going to be able to capture the objectives, which is the outposts, and as soon as you start losing 2 outposts consistently, you're just going to lose by points. Now, this is a really silly stat. I don't know why they even brought this up. It's pretty obvious for most people. The question is, how are they going to be fixing this? And a lot of it just comes down to the matchmaking system, as I mentioned before, and balancing out the classes. Even if there is pre-mades, if there's one pre-made on one side and one on the other side, it should be fine as long as most of them are playing very similar classes amongst each other. Next up, we're going to talk about arenas, and apparently, guys, arena diversity is high. I couldn't just not crack up when I heard that, because I've played arenas for the most part, and there's just no way arena diversity is high. Maybe there's some deceiving going on in the background there, but BBs are apparently popping off in arenas, guys. Even though BB is in one of the worst states it's ever been in the game, we all know arenas are dominated by 3 factors. It's dominated by heavy melee decks, paired up with either healers or ranged DPS. Ranged DPS is most likely Firestaffs, which they did say, and I agree. I think Firestaff IG or Firestaff Rapier might be the best ranged DPS class in Arena, alongside bows, the bolt-caster bows. But predominantly, it's heavy melee decks, healers, and those ranged light DPS players. Maybe a couple of flamethrowers here and there, but you get the points. They also didn't bring up anything about the current matchmaking system, which really worries me a ton going forward, because not only have we not gotten cross-server matchmaking, but there's no signs of ranked matchmaking either. They didn't address the 2-man queues heavily dominating arenas. This is something I thought they might have brought up, because they made a good point about pre-mades and OPRs, but then they didn't really talk about it in arenas. 2-man queues in arenas are just dominating, because you're going to be most likely facing other people that are solo queuing or 2-man queuing, so who do you think is going to have a higher chance? A pre-made in arena 2-man queue, let's just say a heavy melee dex and a healer, or some, DPS working together, or just solo queues paired up with randos, right? Like, of course 2-man queues are going to win. How are they going to address this? Well, my easy fix to this would be having 2 game modes, having a solo queue mode that you only queue into other people who are also solo queuing, and a pre-made mode, which is not 2-man queue, it's a 3-man queue, so you can do pre-mades versus pre-mades. And if they get this sorted out, if they also add cross-server matchmaking, then you could add the matchmaking ranked system. Next up, we got the PvP balance changes. Now, these are subject to change. Sometimes they say one thing and then it comes out differently. Sometimes they shadow nerf or shadow buff on the release of the expansion. For example, the stamina dodge change they did to medium from 40 to 50. So I would expect the same thing to happen here. But yeah, let's just take this as a grain of salt and go through it. first up, we got the Koya's knee guards. It's gonna get a buff. They didn't specifically say how much it's gonna change or what's gonna change. I honestly think this is a good artifact. It's something that you could be utilizing on medium instead of light, because on light you already have the featherweight that provides you a ton of armor rating for a light loadout. But for medium, you can only go for either tumblers or void plate in that regards. Tumblers a little bit inconsistent because you actually need to proc the fortify. Void plate doesn't scale as good as it would in, for example, a heavy loadout, so void plate makes sense for the heavy loadout. So this, for a build to consistently mitigate range damage on medium, would make a lot of sense. So I'm all for this. Then we got the Pestilence. It's going to be tweaked when it comes down to the outgoing healing reduction number. Probably a minor number change in that regard. I still see Pestilence being the best secondary pad weapon for 5-stars. But other than that, probably the Deep Freeze just is better overall. We got the Flamethrower next. Reduced speed. Now, there's no real specifics on that, but let's just assume it's going to be a reduction of movement speed while you're charging up the flamethrower, channeling the flamethrower. If you guys already know me, I hate this ability. I don't even know why this is in the game alongside Pylon. I think it's just an absolute disgrace of an ability. You could literally play this with a steering wheel, but that's probably why they bring controller support. So flamethrower is still in the game, you're just going to get it slightly nerfed. Then we got the Empowering Explosive Arrow exploit removed. Now, I'm not going to elaborate how to do this. I am aware of it, but essentially you could keep the empowerment buff for an extremely long time. So it's great that they did remove one of the many exploits still out there. And then we also have the Empowering Fireball perk nerf. Now, this is a valid nerf. I think in the PvP side of things, it's one of those perks that you kind of must have. You can either have it on the weapon or on the gear. They're both very good, depending on what you're going for. And I just hope they don't really nerf this to oblivion. Just a small damage tweak, and that should be good to go. And final change is going to be to the Void Blade. It's one of those things where they're trying to find a spot for these certain abilities to be in the game. Just like Incinerate, they have a little bit of a fetish, and they've been buffing it consistently. Lights and heavies utilizing the Void Blade will provide more damage. We'll see how this goes. I definitely think it's one of those abilities that's extremely clunky to use in the PvP side of things, especially considering there's a lot of desync when it comes to melee weapons. But hey, if they make it valid and there's more people playing out different specs, I'm all for it. And next up, the big one, in my opinion, is going to be the equip loadout balances. This is obviously going to interact with light, medium, and heavies. So first up, we're going to talk about the light melee loadouts. So I think this was most of a Season 5, but light melee loadout is probably going to be different to light range loadouts, and it makes sense because ranged light just has way more effective uptime. What I mean by that is they don't have to position themselves awkwardly to do damage like a melee would, and on top of that they can reposition and still do damage in the process. Melees, yes, you do a ton of damage, but the problem is you have to always position yourself to find a target to do damage, and at the same time you take 3 hits and you're gone. So I can understand where they're going with this direction, but at the same time it's going to be very hard to balance it, because if you make it too easy for light melees to find value, either making them tankier, provide faster movement speed, or just an overall increase of damage, a very skilled player with these buffs, if they make it a little bit too good, is going to be either extremely hard to kill, or he's going to be one-shotting other light players. And that's going to be very hard to balance. So let's see, when there is more knowledge, more information about this, what direction they're going for, because I'm a bit concerned. It's very hard to find a balance in that regard, and I don't necessarily think light melee decks, for example, should be a thing. And if they are a thing, they should be extremely hard to play to get that value. And the final one, heavy stam dodges increase from 50 stam to 55 stam. Now, the reason why they're doing this is because there's really no reason to play medium decks. Yes, you lose the 10% damage by going heavy, but you gain way more than 10% damage mitigation. You get better scaling for any type of fortification buff, shuriken forts, any fortification buff from abilities, or just your perks on your gear, for example. You get an extra piece of freedom, an extra piece of resilience, and because you have more sustainability, you have more uptime, which means more damage over time. So it's very redundant going medium decks. Back in the day, medium was really good because you had the stamina benefits. They kind of just shadow nerfed that on the release of the expansion without saying anything about it. But yeah, I mean, there's just no reason to handicap yourself by playing medium right now. However, if they make it so that you only have 2 iframes playing heavy, I could see a lot of people transitioning back to medium or forcing themselves back to medium, which means you'll have 3 iframes. However, I'm not even sure if they're aware of this. I hope they are. But Hardy right now, 700 gear score provides you a little over 10 stamina, which means even if you are playing on heavy, and your stamina displays 0 after you've utilized 2 stamina dodges, which is 110 in total, you will still have 0.45 stamina remaining, which means you still have a 3rd dodge. People will definitely still play heavy in that regard. On top of that, I actually still think some builds, like melee dex builds, will still play heavy regardless of the stamina changes, just because of the fortification prowess that you get from the escalating of armor rating. We're talking about, you know, spear, sword, and shields with the fortifying shield rush. We're talking about spear IG with all the fortifications from the IG itself. But most will probably prefer to play medium dex just because of more iframes. And I think this is a really valid change because, first of all, medium dex is just absolutely useless. It's not like medium is completely useless, by the way, guys, because most bruisers, if not all bruisers, are playing medium, and it makes more sense to play medium than it is to play heavy right now, because you're going for high con anyways, so you don't need to go heavy because you're already tanky enough, so you might as well just go medium and do some damage. But yeah, you guys get the point. Just trying to find a little bit of a balance here between medium and heavy. I think light is obviously more predominant for light range DPS players or healers, which makes sense. But medium and heavy is in a bit of an awkward spot where only bruisers are playing medium. So a little bit of a balance there makes a lot of sense. And that's it for today, guys. If you guys liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment down below, go to the community Discord, ask some questions if you have anything concerning the next patch or anything other than that. And like I mentioned at the start of the video, I will be uploading another video, and it's going to be about the best ways to transition back to medium, if you are playing heavy decks, of course. So hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.